Hi, the Mudbrooker here. Today I'm going to cook something on my cook stove. I'm going to make some steak Diane. It's a wonderful recipe, really popular in the 50s and 60s. Kind of fallen out of favor since then, but it used to be served tableside. Big dramatic presentation. You'll see what I'm talking about in a little bit. Before we get started, I'd like to thank my patrons on Patreon. Kay's Kist, Benedict Riggers, Joy Jones, Damian Bamer, Leo, Theodore Engelke, Valentin Tolman, Rudy Valvano, Kiasby, and John Wheeler. You can have a little bit of brandy in their honor today, and you'll see this brandy again later on. Here's to you guys. Thank you much for your continuing support. Anyway, there's a little bit of prep work involved, but not too much. Take a piece of sirloin and pound it flat till it's about a ½ inch thick. You want to salt and pepper both sides fairly good. And get that seasoned up. Then we'll set it aside for a minute. And we'll get started on our sauce. It's a very simple pan sauce, but you got to make a little bit of it up ahead of time. A little pepper on that guy. And we'll set him out of the way. To make your sauce, you'll need a couple of tablespoons of Dijon mustard. Doesn't have to be really precise measurements, just a goodish amount. A couple of tablespoons worth. You'll want a teaspoon or so, maybe a little more, maybe a couple, of tomato paste. Yeah, I'll give it a little bit more. A couple of teaspoons of Worcestershire sauce. There's a couple there. Set him there. Where is it? A good dash of hot sauce, or you can use a little bit of cayenne pepper. There we go. And a ½ cup of strong broth. This is broth that I reconstituted from my portable soup, my beef portable soup. In the restaurants they would usually use demi-glace, which is a concentrated veal bone broth that's roasted with vegetables, but it's basically the same thing that I'm using now. We'll stir that up a little bit. Slowly add your broth. Oh, I almost forgot. This is optional, but I like a little bit of horseradish in mine. Dig a little dab out. There we go. Besides your sauce, you're going to need about 3 tablespoons worth of chopped shallots. You can use green onions, they work too. A couple of teaspoons of minced garlic, and some sliced mushrooms. You'll also need about a ¼ cup each of brandy and a ¼ cup of heavy cream, but we won't need them until later. There's the sauce made. The steaks are ready to go. Let me get my setup moved over to the stove and we'll have us some fun. Okay, here we go. I've had a fire going for about an hour and 1/2. Got a nice hot little fire going in there, a good bed of coals. It's burning fairly quick, so I have the draft shut most of the way off. And since the point of this whole exercise is to use vintage iron on a vintage stove, I'll show you what I'm working with today. Hopefully that'll show up good. That is a number 9 Erie Artistic Logo skillet. Erie was a brand name made by Griswold when they first started out. Griswold started off as the Griswold and Selden Company, and most of their skillets used the brand name of Erie. They did use the Griswold name on some things, but most of their skillets, like I say, were Erie brand. And they kind of phased that out by about 1910, 1912, and started using the Griswold name on all their skillets. This particular logo style was only made for 1 year, it's 1907. It's actually a pretty scarce and desirable pan. So if you ever come across one, they're worth a fair bit of money. One this size in this condition sells for about $300 I've seen on eBay. But anyhow, what we're doing is taking a little clarified butter, about a tablespoon, maybe 2 worth. You can use oil if you wish. We'll get that in the pan, put that right over the fire so it gets nice and hot. You also notice that pan had a smoke ring on it. That's what a smoke ring was for. It would sit down on the top of the stove or inside the eye if it was small enough, and it would seal the smoke inside the stove, keep things from smoking. Once that gets hot enough, which I think we will be shortly, let her go until that just starts to shimmer a little bit. That's usually hot enough. Yeah, I think so. Anyhow, you take your steaks and you throw them in the pan. Now we don't want to cook these all the way through yet. Just want to give them a decent sear on either side. So while that's searing, yeah, I got everything I need. It'll just take a minute or so on either side. Now I did stove black the top of the stove if you noticed, but I'm really not happy with that stove polish I used. It didn't finish very well, and once I fired it up it kind of popped little blisters where it shows through the rust of the pitting. It didn't make hardly any smoke. The old style polish I used to use, you'd have a big nasty blue haze all through the house, and it really polished the stove good. Which is, the new formula is kind of nice, it doesn't smoke as much, but I'm really not happy with the results. I'll see if I can find my old polish and give her another coat. Once I got some good stove black on this, you'll notice that this is splattering a little bit. That's good. You'll notice this is spattering a little bit, and that'll help to season the iron on the stove a little bit. Anyhow, once your meat is seared a little bit, take it out, set it aside. Put about a tablespoon of cold butter in your pan and add your minced shallots. And about a clove's worth of minced garlic. You want to cook the garlic and shallots until they're just lightly browned, but we don't want them to burn. And that's why I throw the cold butter in there. That will help to cool the pan off a little bit. Once those are done, now comes the fun part. Take your 1/4 cup of brandy, pour that in, and strike a match. I can see why restaurants quit doing this table side, because fireballs in the dining room do tend to lead to liability problems. But it's still just cool as hell to do, ain't it? You don't have to set your alcohol on fire. You can just let it evaporate. Turn the fire off on your stove and let it evaporate. Now we'll add our sauce. Stir that around. There's my cream. And add the 1/4 cup of cream. And we're going to let this simmer and reduce for a little while until it thickens up some. I'm going to open up my draft a little bit. Fire seems to be settling down just a tiny bit more than I want it to. It takes a bit of time to get a knack for managing your fire. And I've been practicing a bit and I'm doing alright with it so far. Put the lid on my garlic. Yeah, it's starting to thicken up a little bit. Now, we put our steak back in. Stir that around. Flip them over. Put any juices in there that are on your plate. And we'll throw in the mushrooms. Now I want this to simmer until the steak is done, so I'm going to take this off the direct flame. I'm going to move it over here where it's a little bit cooler. This will take a couple minutes and I'll be back when it's ready to go. Okay, this has been simmering for a few minutes and the steak feels like it's done. You can tell when a steak is done by how firm it is when you touch it. So I'm going to take this out. Oops, there you go. Put that guy, I'll set him here. Now, get some of that good sauce on there. Get all my mushrooms picked out. The way you would control the speed of things cooking on top of a wood stove is mostly by where you put your pan. It'll be a lot hotter. You can put it right directly over fire like I did at the beginning there. Or you can put it on top of the firebox but with the cover on, or you can move it around to various places on the surface. It'll be hotter back here than it would be over in this corner. But anyhow, there you have Steak Diane. It's a fantastic dish, impressive as hell if you set it on fire, and I hope you enjoyed this. I will see you guys after I eat, and I'll see you next time.